of 2018. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Councilor McDonald, Deputy Mayor Tanner, all those in favor? Opposed, motion is carried. So yeah, I feel like I haven't seen most of you since last year. A bad joke to start the year off on, but so welcome back. I hope everyone had a good holiday and enjoyed a little bit of downtime. Hopefully things were quiet. You had a chance to spend time with family. Are there any announcements for anything that's upcoming or anything that's just happened recently that you want to talk about? Councilor Thorburn.
I've got a few with the museum, Bridgewater Town Museum. January the 14th, they're having a coffee club on Thursday down there. And on the 14th at 2 p.m., David Rolliston will introduce his book, Nova Scotia's Industrial Heritage. There is an admission fee. On the 18th at 6:30, the Museum Commission has their annual general meeting, and results of the museum strategic plan will be presented, as well as an annual report of activities. On the 22nd at 2 p.m., this should interest some, murders in Lunenburg County. Here, Peter Reich will tell the tale of two infamous murders in Lunenburg County by Peter Mailman in 1873 and James Fleming in 1965. Learn about these horrific events, admission fees apply. And March the 14th at 4 p.m., Friends of the Desbrizé Museum Society annual general meeting and their 30th anniversary. And reserved July the 8th for the Friends of the Desbrizé Museum 5K Heritage Fun Run Walk. Run or walk for fun and support your local museum. So that's just some announcement that's coming up for the museum and Friends of the Desbrizé.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements of anything upcoming? No? It's a bit of a quiet time of year. We have a delegation for 610, but we're usually pretty quick at this. But I see Mr. Smith, is it? You look very familiar. We trust that you found your way down to this very unfamiliar space. If you're ready to go, if you would like to come and give your presentation.
Actually, I'm number 3.
You're number 3? All right. Well, whoever is up first, if you could just introduce yourself, just for the record, please. And,
thank you very much, Your Worship, and your fellow councillors. My name is Lloyd Campbell. I'm a longtime resident of Bridgewater, as many of you may realize, and a former employee, I might say. I came here, I think, in 1972 as superintendent of schools and worked for the town for 10 years. And bought a house at 6 Linden Avenue, which makes me a very valuable taxpayer over the years, and a very satisfied one. 10 years ago, year 2007, the field house in Bridgewater was built by some very community-minded people. It proved over the years to be a very excellent value to the ratepayers of this town. A lot of leadership went into that by this council, a lot of support by this council and other councils, and a lot of leadership from our early society, which was formed to govern the fieldhouse activities and provide services to the people of our communities. 2 years ago, a number of changes were made. Some of the board members from the past left and moved on to other things. Some of the staff members who were key in the past left, and at that point, some new board members came on. I being one of them, and then your former employee, Ken Smith, more recently even than me. And so this evening, we have come here as you prepare in your deliberations for your 2018 budget to make a presentation. I believe all of you have copies of it. And I want to begin by thanking council for your invitation here this evening. And I'd like to specifically introduce two other people to assist in the presentation to you at this time. The first person is Mr. Josh Good. He is the manager of the Field House facility here in Bridgewater, and then followed by Mr. Ken Smith, who will be speaking to you about financial matters. And at this point in time, I would call on Josh to make a brief presentation to you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. So, like Lloyd mentioned, my name is Josh Good. I'm the facility manager at HB Studio Sports Center. Part of our presentation tonight is a video that we've prepared. I want to say very quickly, Lucas Bungay, who is a grade 12 student at Parkview, put a lot of work into the video along with us. So thank you to Lucas, and hope you enjoy. Okay, take two.
The HB Studio Sports Center is a community-based recreation facility located in the town of Bridgewater on the South Shore of Nova Scotia. Constructed as a 49,000 square foot building with a 200 by 100 foot indoor field, 60-meter sprint track, plus a top floor, 4-lane, 209-meter oval running track. In 2007, a group of soccer enthusiasts, the South Shore Fieldhouse Society, came together to try and bring the sport to the town, as it was desperately needed at the time. It took them just 6 months to put together a business plan, garner the support of area municipalities, businesses, and sports groups to make the proposed indoor multi-sport fieldhouse and walking track a reality. Here's a few words from Jeremy Weller, who's speaking on behalf of the South Shore District Board.
My name is Jeremy Weller. I'm the founder and owner of HB Studios, a video game company in Louisville. We employ around 90 people on the South Shore. And we were heavily involved with the funding of this building alongside the other partners. It has been a wonderful recruitment tool for us over those years, because people really do, when they're going to move their young family or move as young people to a rural area like this, they always look at what recreation facilities are on offer, and this is a big attraction for them. And for the company, we've had our soccer nights and run our own soccer teams using the facility all winter ever since. At the time of the idea for the building came up, there was very little on the South Shore for soccer at the time. Everyone was playing in gyms, or just not really playing at all. And the idea for the building was to enable kids and adults to be able to play soccer, get exercise, remain healthy during the winter, but also to build something that was an attraction for the South Shore as well. When it comes to soccer on the South Shore, this facility is absolutely essential. There is a similar facility in the Valley, there's one in the Highland District as well, and it is so important for the kids and older teens and the adults to be able to remain active and to be able to play in a quality soccer facility during the winter. Summer months are so short, we really, really do need this facility. During the winter, we run programs for everyone up from under 4s right through to adults, females and males. We put that Monday nights, Tuesday nights, Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, and Friday nights, Saturday mornings, and all through Sunday. If we didn't have this facility here, the soccer standards on the South Shore would drop dramatically. It's also, the track is a fantastic installation as well. That enables many old people who aren't comfortable getting their exercise in the winter outdoors to be able to come here and get their exercise and aid their health. There's also many other activities that go on in this building which are valuable for the community.
From being just an idea in early 2007, the South Shore Fieldhouse Society announced the final plans in September, setting in stone the things to come. Contributions to help with the construction came from the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, the Town of Bridgewater, Municipality of the District of Lunenburg, the Town of Lunenburg, the Municipality of the District of Chester, the Government of Nova Scotia, and finally, a local video game development company called HB Studios. It's more than just a soccer and track facility. Not only are these sports supported, they're accompanied by judo, flag football, and karate. The facility is open to anyone who wants to have a good time partaking in their favorite activities. Now let's hear from some athletes on what they think of the facility.
Hi, my name is Sarah Taylor. I play for Team Canada at the U20 World Cup, and I currently go to Boise State University. Without the fieldhouse, my path would have been very different. I got recruited while playing in the fieldhouse, and it's also been an instrumental part in my development as a soccer player. The fieldhouse has given me an opportunity to coach the sport that I love, while being able to develop young athletes in our community. One of my favorite things about the fieldhouse is that we're able to train all year long, and we don't have to stop under special winters. I think that if we want to continue developing athletes out of our small and wonderful communities, they need a place to train, and they need a place to get better. And for me as an athlete, that place was the fieldhouse.
Hello from Calgary! I'm Rachel McIntosh, and I'm Jenna Martin-Evans, and we were asked to speak to you today about why HB Studios has helped our training over the years. We just want to thank HB Studios, all their staff, everyone for accommodating us so much. Whenever we get a chance to come home, we have everything to our disposal. You guys are so helpful, and we get to get everything done that we need to help further our training. It also allows us to come home and visit our family, because without that facility, we miss out on training. So it allows us to come home and see our family as often as we need to, and to reconnect with our athlete family from Bridgewater that we don't get to see all the time. Absolutely. And it also gives us a chance to give back to the up-and-coming generation of all the talent that we have in Bridgewater. It is a small town, but we have so much talent, and to have access to HB Studios, especially during the 9 months of winter that we have, it's a great opportunity for us to all to get better, and also just the people that come and exercise. It's an amazing facility that I think a lot of people that they don't understand, and we just really appreciate it. Absolutely. We wouldn't be the athletes that we are today, I think, without HB Studios.
Absolutely.
I wish it was there when I was in high school, but I'm very grateful that it's there now.
Definitely. We just want to thank HB Studios and all the staff and everyone. Thank you so much, guys.
We love you!
I get the fun part. Actually, whoops, that's all right. I don't need those anyway.
Where'd you get that?
to make the long story short, what we're requesting, we have a cash flow issue. And what it is if you look at the financial statements, we have an accumulated deficit over 10 years of about $170,000. And where that came from, and I know your time limit, so I'm going to jump over this pretty quick. Where it came from was basically when the facility was built, a $3 million facility, $2 million was received up front to pay the contractor, and the other $1 million was pledged over installments over 10 years. So the society, and again, I'm going back to records, so I wasn't there, I was sitting over there when this occurred. Basically, took out a bank loan, and the bank loan was not a mortgage, it was a commercial loan at 6.25% because the society didn't own the property. I did an analysis of the interest on that over the 9-10 years, and basically it was $350,000 that came out of the operating statement. So over the 10 years, instead of having a surplus of $170,000, the society had a deficit of accumulated deficit of $170,000. Over the years, the contributions have helped pay down the loan, which is down around, and I made a mistake, it's actually $50,000 higher than what I noted in my request. It's approximately $400,000 as we speak now. And that's what we're up against. We're basically running operationally break even. What we need is an infusion of capital or a significant surplus operationally each year moving forward. We're in a transition period. I guess I'm the last one through the door in the transition period, but as they mentioned, the new board is new within the last year or two, and they changed the business model to move forward. We're looking at a business plan to bring in different usages for the facility, and we've also made some changes. I shouldn't say we, I just knew the ball game, but made some changes to try to improve both the revenues and expenses. So this year's end is not quite finished, but it looks more promising this year. So at the end of the day, to put it in simple terms, if for myself, if it was break even, we would need $50,000 a year from somewhere in order to pay down that mortgage, because there's just no more capital to pay down that mortgage. So the ask is $66,000 from the municipal units, 30 from Town of Bridgewater, 30 from MODL, and 6 from the other units. And that was based on the original contributions to build the facility. That's where those figures come from. And with the society to come back to each of the councils by the end of August to show a long-term plan to finance the facility ongoing. Right now, the bank is giving us a temporary bump of $20,000 over a line of credit of 10, and we're working with the bank. We did look at the option of trying to stretch out our payments further, but in order to do that before April of 2019, it would have cost us penalties about $28,000, so that didn't seem very, very feasible. So that's basically the ask to the councils. And any questions? I know I didn't cover this part because I knew your time was tight, and we thought it was important for you to see the video, what the benefit was to the community in the region.
Any questions from members of council? Councilor Thorburn?
I didn't know, when I looked at your figures, that, like the Power Corp made or supposedly a donation of $31,000, but we haven't collected one penny of that, have we?
No, they made a donation day one, and I think it all came in. If it,
Received or due now, it says 31,000.
all the pledges have been collected.
Okay.
It's, I think the illustration there was that 2 million was up front,
Yes,
and the receivable meant that those are the ones that were outstanding,
yes,
and most of those were over 10 years.
all right. So the corporate and individual contributions of $267,000 has all been paid?
Yes,
Back.
and I think if you walk in HB Studios, you can see on the walls the different organizations and individuals that gave donations to the facility
Okay.
during when it was
I
built.
just, the way that it's presented here, I didn't see that clearly, but if you
No.
say so, it must be so.
I can follow up on that, but I'm pretty
No,
sure.
that's okay.
Question, Councilor Muse? No?
Yeah, I guess probably a direct question. How much money does the field house owe right now from the original debt?
400. Okay, it's about about 400,000.
Okay. And so this ask will, that if approved by us, will carry it through until August of 2019,
No, to this fall.
to this fall.
Yeah, because
Okay.
we're basically knocking down the debt 50,000 a year. We're stretched right now at the bank. We've gone 30,000, almost used a full line of credit. But the positive is we're going our higher revenue months when it comes to spring and the usage is down. Then we don't. Our expenses are higher than our regulars.
Well, essentially, that was my question. How are you going to handle paying off that debt? And you're paying it off from revenue?
We're in a position now to pay down the debt is other sources of capital, infusion of capital. If we don't get the infusion of capital, obviously we can't pay the bank.
Okay.
Councilor Fisher?
I was just wondering, so the original demand loan was a prime variable rate. It was renegotiated 2014 to be, is it a fixed interest rate now?
From what I can see from the records, again, I'm picking off the financial statements, it's always been 6.25%.
Okay.
And what the renegotiation was, the monthly payments originally were $10,000 a month, which was fairly aggressive because they wanted to pay off that. But operationally, I think they realized that they had to stretch them out further because they weren't generating the funds from operations to pay it down that fast. So they changed the terms, going from monthly payments of $10,000 a month to $6,000 a month.
So I just wondered if the idea has been explored for like a secured mortgage. Is that a possibility for a more favorable rate on?
It would be definitely far favorable. In fact, probably our interest over the years would be
Yeah.
half of what it is.
Right, yeah. So
So-
has that been looked at, or is it?
If there was an opportunity, I can't answer that one from
Okay.
the past, but I think at the time it was
Just the
yeah.
savings on interest would be significant if you could get a more favorable rate on a secured loan.
moving forward, yes,
Yeah.
it would be.
So my understanding was because the land is still owned by the town, because they don't own the land that the building
They
sits on,
couldn't
that
get a
complicated the
mortgage.
fact
Okay.
that the ability to get a mortgage. That's my understanding.
Okay.
No, that's correct. The same as another situation we ran into.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So Ken, last year was the last year of our 31,000 contribution. I think that was over 10 years or something like that, if that's correct?
HB Studios made the last installment, which was the 25,000, you're right.
Yeah.
It received it in January, February of 2017. And since then, two of the original directors have been loaning the society money or donating money. So you've got your volunteers in the community actually putting trying to help the cash flow. And unfortunately, it's the point where it's just not feasible.
working.
So that's why we decided to come to the councils. I think the new board acknowledged that maybe we should have been here a year earlier, but we can't change history where we need that capital.
Deputy Mayor.
There looks to be a problem, or at least a problem in 2016 with merchandise sales. It just dove. What caused that? Like, why is that?
Because I think looking at the financials, it wasn't worth it financially.
Okay.
Plus, it's labor intensive too.
Okay.
So if you look at the margin.
The actual return.
Yeah, and as it was, and that's going to impact, I can't remember if it impacts, I think last year they had to write off 5,000. And again, that's a change in the business model.
Okay.
To try to be more of a land owner, a facility owner without hiring a lot of staff
Sure.
Because we rely on a lot of the organizations in the community, whether it's the minor football, the baseball, the track and field, and they're all good organizations. They have their own structure, so it's better for them to try to bring more of them in.
Okay.
One thing they're looking at is trying to get some of the Rugby Nova Scotia, for example, and some of the organization in Halifax who are tight on gym time, and this facility is just what they're looking for. So if we can create more of those opportunities together, we can generate more revenue.
Okay. Yeah, and of the total municipal ask, 20% of that is other municipalities. I assume that's every other municipality in Lunenburg County?
Yes, and the ask wasn't last time to Queens, but we're going to make a presentation to Queens too, because it's a regional facility.
Well, so that was going to be my question. They are not, Queens is not included in that total municipal ask you had in the document,
The
correct?
6,000? We haven't broken it down yet.
So it's only 10% then.
You're right, it's 10. It got a little complicated because the original contributors, Chester put 25,000 in straight. They were the only ones that didn't go in the installment. Queens wasn't approached, so the board's going to look at it and try to break up what we're going to ask each one. I delivered the packages, the three, Mahone Bay, Chester, and the town of Lunenburg today. So,
Okay.
and we set dates for that.
I guess maybe I'm out of line saying this, but formulas that are typically based on demographics of a particular region tend to be more popularly received. And I guess this seems to be more of a 50-50 between us and MODL. And given demographic breakdown, it would seem that that's underweighted, I guess, for MODL. Have you considered changing that model at all, the ask model?
I think we looked at it and looked at the fact that we based our ratios on
the original?
what the original
Okay.
investments, because at that time the value was assessed, because it gets fairly, rather than changing it,
Okay, fair enough.
and but if the municipalities want to change it, we're open to anything.
Okay.
Councilor Graves.
Certainly is a valuable facility. I know my daughter made great use of it. Have you reached out to Soccer Nova Scotia, South Shore Soccer, some of the other original funding partners, and see if there's something there?
We're going to, and we've been in touch with them. We're also the other levels of government, but given most times they'll ask about the municipal unit's participation.
Okay. And I guess this is a one-time ask of 30,000, correct?
Depends what comes out of our when we come back in August, because if we're trying to pay down 400,000 at 30, 40, 50,000 a year, and we can't generate the revenue, then obviously we're going to have to have another ask. But it's getting easier, because the first year the interest expense was 50,000. Now it's down to 25 because the balance is lower. And we'll see how all the pieces, but I think, and in speaking to the bank, it's their loan. They have $400,000 on the table. They'll help us to a point, but they also realize that it's a volunteer society and really it helps if they know the municipalities are going to support,
Okay.
the facility.
Yeah.
Makes it
Councilor-
easier.
Councilor McDonald.
Has there been, any amount of discussion around what the business plan might be? Like, I'm not picking up a whole lot of confidence that you're going to be able to come up with a solid business plan, and, this is going to get you through to get to that business plan. Have there been any kind of solid ideas or any discussions at this point?
I'd have to.
Good evening. My name is Doug Quinn. I think probably some of you know me anyways. I'm the only original person left on the board. The facility started out primarily as a soccer facility, but it always was seen as a regional facility. The largest by far participants, I wasn't one of them, was soccer. And we naively thought that it would be a good business plan to have one person who would both be the director of soccer programming and also manage the facility. Over the years, it became readily apparent that sometimes the interests of those two parties weren't exactly the same. It's sort of hard to negotiate, rental increases for field use, for example, when you're paying 50% of the salary and the other party is paying the other 50%. Plus, without getting into any specifics, there was occasional disagreements within the soccer community. And the board decided that what we should do is manage the facility, because it clearly was becoming a regional facility for many activities, and we should let soccer look after soccer and have their own discussions and what have you, and we'd rent them the time and we would find other tenants. So that's what we did in part. We made a lot of tough decisions. About half the staff left. To answer Councillor Tanner's question in a very quick session, the store was a really great idea the first 2 or 3 years, but quite frankly, everybody and their cousin can now call up someplace in the middle of nowhere and Amazon drops a whole set of uniforms off at your door. About 4 days later, the FedEx man rolls up and you couldn't compete, and staffing and overhead. And there became a couple more businesses in town that also sold uniforms and cresting, etc. And quite frankly, we're trying not to be in competition with tax-paying businesses in this town, so we got out of that. The other thing we discovered is, indeed, when we said it was a regional facility for multiple groups, and I remember at the time there was one person who was on council and now works for the municipality, said it's a soccer facility. He said, no, we're going to bring a lot more other stuff. We have brought a lot of other stuff here, but many of the groups in the South Shore are small. Fly fishing is small. Drone flying is small. Judo is quite small. Those Brazilian stick fighters with those bamboo sticks that they whack each other with are relatively small in number. So while you can get an awful lot of groups, none of them can float a full facility. They're looking for as cheap rent as they can, and they can't afford their own facilities. You'll recall a couple of the groups that are now here used to be in empty storefronts on King Street and the like. So we've changed to a business model. We are now marketing the facility. Any hours that somebody isn't renting, we're trying to rent it for various things. That's why we now have gone out and bought bouncing balls, et cetera, and we've got a couple sponsors and hope to get more for preschool kids to come and play for free, to be active and what have you. And I guess what Josh is negotiating, that's part of Josh's mandate, is fill the facility with whatever. Birthday parties are becoming more popular. We're also gonna look at trade shows, et cetera, but again, you have to make tough decisions. If you wanna cover that field, it's $60,000 to $70,000. Can you get enough trade shows that isn't gonna already take away from some of the hopeful revenue from the LCLC or from Best Western or from, I think it's not Days Inn anymore, whatever the one is on North, is it still Days Inn? I'm terrible at those things. We have to be really hard-nosed about keeping that facility going so that we can have all of these groups. We have a private sponsor who puts in some money every year so that we will not raise the track from $2 to walk. Because the board thinks that more than $2 is going to be a real impediment to a lot of seniors and what have you. But over the years, even our most optimistic estimates, I can tell you the power rates with all the green factors we have has blown us to hell. So I guess the simple question is, I hope that answers your question. The business model is we're not programming and facility managers. We're facility managers, and we will rent it to anybody who is A, legal, and B, won't hurt any of the amenities, whether it's the rubberized track, the special surface on the field, or what have you. And the various sports can do their own administration. And we bill you the hours. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of council? Oh, Councilor McDonald.
How have multiple facilities such as the LCLC, maybe YMCA, how does that all factor in for you guys? How does the picture unfold for for an organization like yours where, for us, often we're competing against ourselves and we can kind of manage our way through that. With you, we don't want to compete with you, but we probably are without recognizing it. Do you find that? Does it play a role in what you guys are trying to accomplish?
Minimally.
I don't know if I'm clear about that.
Yeah,
but
minimally.
Okay.
The key features are not a competition. Nothing at the LCLC is going to compete with the kind of world-class artificial turf facility we have. Nothing that the LCLC has with the pool, we can't offer any of that, nor do we want to. The same thing with the rink. Has there been enough cooperation between the two facilities? Do you want a candid answer? No. I'm disappointed, and this is a personal opinion, but I guess if you're the oldest bear in the woods, I guess you have a chance to at least make one roar before they shoot you. When we built the facility, everybody made clear, and we had to confirm that we would not do anything to hurt anything in town, particularly there was concern about the Y. Which is why we did not do daycare, and which is why we did not get into weights and all the other related things the Y was in. At the request of this council, which showed great leadership, we showed a little naivety. We were asked to add a track, which we did, but we capped it at the same as we did our general ask, which was 15%. Two things. First of all, we thought we'd get more support from the big business, but some big business was holding off for what turned out to be the LCLC, so we didn't get quite as much support. And the second thing was, instead of just building a track, which was i.e. something to walk around, we put a rubberized track in, which actually the Medical Society can use for remedial walking, strengthen muscles before an operation, rehab after. That cost us more money than we thought it should, and we naively didn't come back and say, could you make that 20 instead of 15? That part's why we're here. Now, am I a little annoyed when the LCLC puts an ad in the paper and leaves our name out of where to walk in Bridgewater? And what you're talking about is walking on concrete around the top of the rink? You're damn right I'm mad. But that's how sometimes life goes. So we need to do a lot more cooperation. I know, for example, I used to be the special events coordinator elsewhere, and we used to take rock bands to places like the field house that they could have a family day, because when they're on stage, that's an act. But when they're not on stage, they like to be, most of them are quite frankly normal family people. So we need to do more joint marketing. We need to look at each other's strengths. But by and large, we are not competing facilities. It's very sad we're not in closer proximity to each other, but that's another thing, that water's gone under the bridge, but we can be ancillary facilities. I was surprised last summer when the LCLC did a soccer camp on the concrete. But, you know, life goes on. But we need to do more things like that, and I think we need to promote to people around what we have, because everybody belongs to associations, professional organizations, professional associations. They all have a lot of 10-person board meetings, 100-person regional meetings, et cetera, et cetera. If people are here doing something of a meeting nature, they might want to come and exercise. On a night like tonight, they could go to the field house if we could make a deal for a cheap walk after spending all day listening to a speaker, et cetera. So, sorry, I'm long-winded occasionally, but we don't overlap very much.
Okay.
But we also don't talk enough, which is hard to believe coming from me.
I'll just add a couple of things. I think there's a lot of opportunities. This field house, I was in the one in Kentville, and this one is far more diversified, lots of potential because of the track and everything. Jenna Martin was in at the holidays. She and her husband was a pro football player. They did a camp. There were 100 youth there in this camp. Like, there's Mallory Taylor, who's from Bridgewater's taking her master's in sports administration in Washington. She's doing a project on this place to try to find ways of utilizing the off-season. So there's all these ideas, and I think what we're trying to do is say with a business plan is pull these together and start exploring all these opportunities, then come back to you and say, this is what we have, this is what we can do, this is how much we may need to pay that off, but at least we have a solid answer and a plan that we can bring back to the councils, and that's essentially, I think there's a lot of opportunity.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? So this, Councilor Thorburn?
Just one, Ken, the user fees for that facility, are they comparable with other facilities? Could we be charging more? Or are we at where we should be?
Comparable.
The field is very comparable, and as I say, there's a private sponsor who will do the differences calculated each year to make sure the walking stays at $2.
Okay, no, great, thanks.
All right, well, thank you for coming. This will be part of our budget deliberations. And we'll keep an eye on our municipal partners, and I'm sure we'll be talking to them and working through this together. So thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is the minutes from December 11th regular town council meeting. Is there any discussion or debate for those minutes? Hearing none, motion to approve the minutes as circulated. Councilor Frazier, Deputy Mayor Tanner. Ready for the question?
Question.
Question called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Our next item is the land use bylaw amendments. This is the second reading of some housekeeping items, which include some pretty neat changes if you've read through them, including the addition of a research zone, which I think that's just the coolest thing. So I'll let our Director of Planning lead us through that. Oh, it's a public hearing, so I have to go through the cheat sheet. Trusty sheet here. All right. So that is the agenda item for the public hearing. So I will call this public hearing to order, and this meeting has been advertised, and so we don't really have an applicant because these are updates. So we'll now turn it over to our Director of Planning.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I have a quick presentation to go over the housekeeping amendments. There are 9 amendments proposed to the land use bylaw. None of them are concurrent or require an amendment of the municipal planning strategy. There was no, as such, there was no public participation program required, so there was no public meeting. It came to Council on December 11th for first reading of the proposed amendments. We've now had 14 days of advertisement in the local paper, and after tonight, the amendments may be appealed to the Utility and Review Board if approved. So of the 9 amendments, I'll just quickly go through them. The first set are related to household repair services. So it's the addition of household repair services to the historic downtown and LaHave commercial zones. This was an omission from the list of permitted uses in both those zones from the 2014 planning review. And there are currently 3 household repair service businesses located in the C1 zone. So the C1 zone is the historic downtown, that's along King Street, and the LaHave commercial zone is on the other side of the river. And so household repair services are permitted in the other commercial zones. And we sort of, when these current businesses were setting up in the C1 zone, we realized it wasn't permitted. We thought it was, and it should have been, and it wasn't. So this is to correct that. The next set of amendments are related to research facilities. So it's the addition of a new permitted use, research facilities, to the group commercial, general commercial, industrial, and light industrial zones. So research is often an accessory use to something such as office or manufacturing, processing, and assembling. But we do have a number of, and have had a number of inquiries. Also, some of the work that we're doing in terms of where we want to go as a community is to be a hub for things such as research and to really try and stimulate that type of activity in our community. And so we felt it required the addition of its own permitted use and its own definition. So the definition proposed is for research facilities is a building or part of a building used for investigation into the natural, physical, and social sciences, which may include engineering and intermediate level product development. So when it gets into something larger, it would move into manufacturing, processing, and assembly, which is allowed in the industrial zone. If it's smaller, it just might be accessory to an office use. Research takes place at many different levels. So the next set of amendments are related to automobile repair services. We discovered it was omitted from the industrial zone, which of any of our zones in town that seems appropriate for automobile repair, it would be the industrial zone, the M1. So this is to correct that omission and to add automobile repair services to the M1 zone. The next is related to shipping containers. So currently shipping containers are allowed as for storage incidental to construction, and they are being regulated as a temporary structure at present. So this is just to provide some further clarity around that for the time being, shipping containers as a storage is a temporary structure, so it's allowed for 210 days within a 12-month period. So it requires a new subsection within section 3.1.6 of the land use bylaw saying in addition to D and E, the earlier subsections, shipping containers shall be regarded as temporary structures with or without a permanent foundation. And we've made a commitment in our report to you and also in the discussion that shipping containers is coming up as an issue to be discussed in greater detail, but for now it's being regulated as temporary structures, and we want to provide that clarity. And the next amendment is related to temporary ground sign. We made some, this is just a clarity. We discovered, we didn't realize when we did the last set of housekeeping amendments that the regulations for temporary ground signs were actually contained within the definition. And that just shouldn't be the case. The regulations exist in section 3.3.9 of the land use bylaw. The definition should just be what is a temporary ground sign, not how it is regulated. So that's to clean up that piece and pull the regulatory component out of the definition. And there was one miscellaneous one. As we were going through, we saw that food bank was listed as a permitted use in the general commercial zone, but food bank is already a permitted institutional use, and all institutional uses are also permitted within the C5 zone. So just to clean up that redundancy that food bank is an institutional use, institutional uses are already permitted within the zone. They didn't need to be specified as something separate, so it's just to clean that up. So those are the 9 amendments for the land use bylaw, and staff recommend that you give it final consideration.
Any questions?
Oh, I had one last slide, just in next steps, just in case. So if approved, then it is appealable to the Utility and Review Board.
Right. Any questions from council? It's pretty straightforward. This is second reading. Any questions from members of the public? No, hearing none. All right, I don't have any closing remarks. It is straightforward, and the changes seem to make sense, and hopefully that little clause to allow a research facility starts to get used in our town. That could be pretty exciting. Someone prepared to make a motion? Well, all of you guys.
Yeah.
Well, you can do that. Councillor Griggs.
I move that the Town Council of the Town of Bridgewater approve the proposed text amendments of the Land Use Bylaw in Appendix A of Document 17-194A, and that this serve as a second and final reading.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Thorburn. Any further discussion?
Question.
Hearing none, question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. I'll have to adjourn that. Thank you. Our next item is update on planning applications. Again,
Thank you. That was just, this is just for your information. Primarily it was to sort of close the loop on 58 York Street, which had been in the midst of an application for a rezoning when it was pulled in, I believe it was in September, the day of the public hearing, because the proposal, because it has to have a proposed use to accompany it, and the proposal had sort of fallen apart. The purchaser of the property had withdrawn. But it was just wanted to let you know that that application is now closed. It's officially fully withdrawn because the owner of 58 York did manage to sell the property to another practicing doctor. And so the current zoning and the current development agreement remain in place, and the new doctor is in the process of moving into that property. The other update that I wanted to provide was just an update on the amendments to the special commercial zone. So last February, staff initiated, we brought forward a proposal to look at the special commercial zone, and we'll actually talk about that at the next item as well. Because the special commercial zone is sort of a unique limited commercial zone. And in the 2014 review of the planning documents, the review removed a couple of the additional commercial uses, such as office and personal service shops, from the as-of-right permissions. And so we'd had a number of inquiries for a couple of properties that were for sale and zoned special commercial. So for example, Horton Insurance Building was one of the main one. We kept receiving inquiries about wanting to know if it used to be an insurance sales office, it would make a great office for, you know, a clinic, for a hairdresser. You know, various uses were coming up. And so we raised this as something to explore. We were given direction from council to explore that. We did have 2 meetings, one with property owners of all special commercial zone properties, and another with general public, because we notified adjacent landowners. But then after those discussions and the number of questions that came up, we realized it was far more complex than simply putting in, reversing the change that was made in 2014 and adding those uses back in. And so this is just to let you know that we've determined that a larger review of the zoning permissions for all the different properties in the C8 zone is required, and so we're deferring that to the next time we review the planning documents overall.
any questions? Deputy Mayor Tanner.
Is the doctor new to the town of Bridgewater, or was already operating in the town of Bridgewater?
Already operating in the town of Bridgewater. I understand they had a practice over on North Street, and both doctors now have their own spaces.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's good.
Any other questions? No? Thank you for that update. Our next item is application for rezoning. This is 20 Pearl Street, and this is going from special commercial to a 2-unit residential zone. They would like it changed to, we have to change some stuff on the map.
The new building looks
That's
good,
right.
huh?
Again,
The
thank
new
you very much,
building
Mayor
looks
and
good.
Council. We received application from the new owners of the Horton Insurance Building, 20 Pearl Street, which, this is our little context map. So here's Pearl Street right here, here's Victoria Road, High Street is right here. And they are proposing to rezone Horton Insurance from special commercial to 2-unit residential to enable them to subdivide a semi-detached dwelling along the common vertical wall and have it on 2 separate lots. So the current zoning, as I said, is special commercial, so that's C8. It's this triangular shaped property right here. primarily residential, low density, R1 and R2. The Wiles Carding Mill is right here, just sort of across Pearl and downhill. And the future land use map on the right shows that when it's no longer special commercial, it should be low density residential. So in thinking about the future, when it's time to rezone this property, the future land use map is suggesting low density residential. The property is very interesting. It's a long, very long history of industrial use. In fact, the Des Brisets Museum calls us one of Nova Scotia's first industrial parks.
Yeah.
The area was called Sebastopol. The current building was actually purpose-built as a church for the Jehovah Witness congregation in the 60s. And then Horton Insurance bought the building in 1980 and operated out of there until late 2015. The proposal is to convert this former commercial building into 2 semi-detached dwelling units on separate lots. And it's the separate lots piece that is really important here, because the special commercial zone does allow a semi-detached dwelling unit, but not on separate lots. It would have to be on the same one, which would mean it would be built and then one half could be owned and lived in and the other half could be rented. But the current owners would like to subdivide it onto separate lots and be able to sell as essentially it's a 2-unit townhouse, semi-detached dwelling. So the current activity on the site, if anybody has been there recently, there's a lot of activity because they have permission to transform the former building into 2 dwelling units, including putting an expansion on it. All of that is within the current zoning rules. And if they aren't successful in their rezoning application, they intend to sell it as a single lot, as a single property. So in reviewing the policy context, in particular, the residential policies R2, R3, R9, and R10 apply. We were looking at, semi-detached dwellings. They're compatible with traditional single-unit, low-density neighborhoods. It provides alternative to having a large house on a large lot. It increases density without disrupting the current neighborhood fabric makeup, and its efficient use of infrastructure and materials. The special commercial zone, as I said before, allows for the conversion, but also when you read through that section of the municipal planning strategy, the intent of that zone is to allow for the commercial use that it was to continue for as long as it may want to continue, but once that commercial use ceases, it should be rezoned in accordance with the future land use map. And in this case, the future land use map suggests low-density residential. So the 2-unit residential zone is a low-density residential designation, and that is the zone that's required to enable the subdivision along the common vertical wall to create 2 separate lots. We had a public participation meeting on December 6th here in Council Chambers. 2 of the adjacent property owners plus the applicants attended, and there was overall support for the proposal and the change. It had been a vacant building for the last year and a half. They're pleased to see that some of the comments from the neighbors have been around, having it subdivided on 2 separate lots and the ability to sell each individually. Homeowners, they're pleased to see homeowners rather than renters for a variety of different reasons. There were concerns around parking, traffic, and access to the Centennial Trail. Pearl Street is a very small street, and so there can't be on-street parking. And the lot itself is very unique in that it's triangular. It's right along the rear property line is along the Centennial Trail, and that's the main point of access for people in that area onto the trail. So they were concerned because one of the neighbors had been using some of the property for wood storage and other things for his business. So they were just concerned that somebody might be able to build something. I've spoken to most of the neighbors of that property. We accidentally put forward that tonight was supposed to be the public hearing, and we had the ads in the paper, and then the holidays hit and we couldn't pull them out because of their print schedule. So I did contact all of the neighbors that received notification and those that attended the meeting to let them know that the public hearing would be at a later date, and had opportunity to talk to them about any other concerns they might have. We didn't receive any written notification or written concerns from anybody. We had a couple phone calls, but that was it. So the proposed amendment requires both a text amendment, which is to remove Horton Insurance, 20 Pearl Street, from the list of permitted commercial uses in the C8 zone, as well as the map amendment to identify this as LUB 2-unit residential. And staff recommend that you consider this.
Any questions from members of council? Councillor Thorburn?
Just one. You're going to comprehensive residential, which is R3 at some point in time?
Not for this property.
No, but I see it in your future map. You show this comprehensive
Oh.
residential, which would mean it would be R3.
No, the amendment is to R2, not to R3.
I'm looking at the future
Sorry, I know,
map.
I'm pulling that up.
There it is there.
That
Yeah.
is a separate property. So on the other side of the trail, that's a large 13-acre property that's zoned comprehensive residential.
Okay.
And this is the property right here.
Yeah. So that's going to be R2.
Yeah, R2.
And the other one will be R3?
This is already R3. back
Already
here.
R3,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
it's just-
woodland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
So the concern about access to Centennial Trail was just more of a convenience thing? Because
They're
they
just-
were cutting
yeah,
through kind of thing?
The
Okay.
property is, actually, I'll go to the context map here. So this section right here
Yeah.
is part, sorry, my hand's a little unsteady, is still part of the property.
Yeah.
And so they were concerned, could somebody build something right in here and block? It was this gentleman was concerned that something could be built right there. But it's very unlikely that anything, certainly not a house would be built there. The
Yeah.
proposal right here is to add an addition right here.
Right.
Nothing's really changing about the physical site. Parking's in front. There'll be parking for 1 or 2 cars per property, so per the 2 lots.
Well, further to that question, just because it's such a narrow strip and you have to have certain setbacks on the property line, don't you?
Exactly.
So it would have to be something very tiny, like a
Very
little
tiny
shed or
and
something.
uniquely shaped.
Yeah, okay. No, that's a good question, though. Councilor Graves?
How far is the addition from the Centennial Trail? 'Cause
Uh,
it looked pretty close if you look at.
It meets
Google
all the
Map.
setback
It does, okay.
requirements, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, otherwise it wouldn't have been given its permission already. Yeah, meets all the setback requirements.
Councilor
You
McDonald?
said the parking remains as is, so there's sufficient off-street parking when.
There is sufficient, so if you look on this is all a paved area right here in front, because that was all parking for Horton Insurance, and it could
Mhm.
accommodate like
Right.
5 cars or so. And it's still the intent to be able to accommodate 1 to 2 cars per unit.
Any further questions? Hearing none, is someone prepared to make a motion?
I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give first reading of the proposed map and text amendments to the land use bylaw as contained in Appendix D of Document 17-185A. And further, that a public hearing be held on Monday, February the 12th, 2018, during the regular meeting of council, beginning at 6 p.m. in the council chambers of Town Hall.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councilor Frazier, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And before we go on to reports and recommendations, I forgot to ask if there were any members of the public here who want to make a presentation. Did you want to make a presentation of any kind?
No.
No? All right, just thought I'd check. After we had the Fieldhouse one, I felt like we had 2. Reports and recommendations, we have our building inspection report for November 2017 there for your review. And I know that we had asked for some additional information. Actually, Deputy Mayor Tanner, you had in the past, and are you happy with
I'm
the
happy.
information that was presented? So there's a little bit more, so the public know, a little bit more information on this report, which I think is good. It's pretty interesting and valuable. Are there any questions about this? If not, then I'm sure Mr. Feener will be more than happy to entertain any questions you have in the future. But Bridgewater is a busy place, so that's always nice to see. Our next item is our request for proposal 2017 wastewater treatment plant boiler replacement. And there is a recommendation not to award this. Mr. Feener, did you want to elaborate on that for the public? Just quickly, please.
I can certainly give you a summary. The original fuel oil methane gas boiler broke down in 2017, and at that time the parts were unavailable because the manufacturer actually was in receivership. So we did issue a request for proposal for design build to replace the boiler. We received one submission from Carmichael Engineering that provided 3 different options, basically different types of equipment and somewhat different setups for what we have. The prices came in and they ranged from about $284,000 to almost $320,000, including the HST, with it possibly being more after the detailed design was complete. So the proposals that we did receive were somewhat incomplete. Not all the information was included at the time because it was a design build type proposal. The approved budget is $200,000. Since that time, the existing equipment manufacturer had been purchased and parts were available, so we were able to source and repair the boiler. In the interim, we had some borrowed parts so that we kept the boiler operating, but we have since purchased the parts and the boiler's up and running. So we are recommending that our request for proposal not be awarded at this time, and that the project be carried forward to allow staff to consider other options, mainly breaking out the design portion to be completed by others, and then have a supplier contractor do the supply and install.
I think it's interesting for the public to know too that this is because you might look at this and wonder why it's so expensive. Part of the uniqueness of this is that it is 2 fuel sources, one of which is that the methane that is produced by the wastewater treatment plant is used as a fuel source, which I think is, I just find that it's pretty efficient. Like we've got it, so we might as well use it. But I think it's unique and kind of neat in its own little way. Are there any questions of the town engineer on that?
I guess just how expensive was the replacement part?
I'm not sure.
Wasn't considerable?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay.
Councilor Fisher?
So we're, I guess, will it be coming back to council after a review, a detailed review, I guess, and possibly adjusting the budget accordingly based on?
Yes, certainly. We'll do the design part of it. We'll do a request for proposal for the design as part of the $200,000 budget, and part of that detailed design would be a detailed cost estimate for the equipment. So that would give us an updated information. We would hope to see that within the carry forward $200,000, but if not, we would have to consider and come back to council for more money.
Okay, great, thanks.
Councilor McDonald?
Just kind of for my own information, but I see that the town solicitor said that they suggested that the submission received didn't meet the terms of the proposal, and therefore he didn't feel that there would be any legal implications in not awarding the tender, but there always can be, right? That we can always be challenged on that?
It's possible. The other thing, I guess, in our favor is that it did exceed the budget.
Right.
Which is more likely, certainly reasonable terms not to evaluate or to award the tender. But in this case, some of the information that we had asked for was not supplied at the time, so it was considered incomplete as well.
Okay, thank you.
Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Fisher?
I'll make a motion, Your Worship, that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff as per document 17-206 and not award RFP 2017-06 wastewater treatment plant boiler replacement, and further that the unspent 2017-18 capital budget to be carried forward to the 2018-19 fiscal year.
You can have a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Tanner, further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Next item is recommendation of Public Service Commission temporary borrowing resolution guarantee. And from time to time, Public Service Commission needs to borrow some money, and we are the body which guarantees that. So if someone would like to make that motion, please.
I move that whereas the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater is a body corporate pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 59 of the Statutes of Nova Scotia 1993 And whereas the said Public Service Commission of Bridgewater has resolved to borrow by the issue and sale of debentures the sum of $1,183,600, $1,183,600 for the purpose of water systems. And whereas the said Public Service Commission of Bridgewater has requested the town of Bridgewater to guarantee the principal and interest of the said debentures when sold pursuant to Section 60, subsection 4 of the Municipal Government Act. Be it therefore resolved that, subject to the approval of the Minister of Municipal Affairs, the town of Bridgewater guarantee the principal and interest of debentures of the Public Service Commission of Bridgewater in an amount not exceeding $1,183,600, $1,183,600 when issued and sold, that the mayor and the clerk are authorized to do all things and execute all documents necessary to give effect to this resolution.
Thank you. Seconder, please, Councilor McDonald. And just for the public, this is financing for carryover for capital, unfinished capital projects. Should have said that at the top. Any other questions?
Question.
Questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. South Shore Vet Dog Zone, winter use, and we have our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture here.
Okay.
Just want to just run us through that, please?
Sure. So I first want to say that the South Shore Vet Dog Zone is a really, really good news story. We did a survey last November, and we had 100 surveys completed within a week. And they were extremely positive. People absolutely love this facility and really appreciate that it's there. And out of the 100 people who filled out the survey, 94% of them, 94, said they'd like it to stay open in the winter. And so we did a lot of research on it, trying to see what the current standard is around Nova Scotia. Checked with a lot of dog parks, Department of Natural Resources, Municipality District of Lunenburg. So we checked around to see what the standard is, and the recommendations that we've come from that research is that signage be installed at both the South Shore Vet Dog Zone entrances, stating no winter maintenance, that park staff follow a regular inspection schedule, and garbage removal when conditions allow, and which is about 1 to 2 times per week. Staff don't keep the gates clear snow or maintain a path to the dog park. And it's just really trying to avoid creating an expectation that it will be maintained, and just to try to keep costs down. So we would recommend the gates remain unlocked, and that staff use a common sense approach and may lock the dog park gates when necessary, especially like in times in the spring thaw when it could get really wet and muddy, and it could ruin, it could really damage it. So really, we also would like to monitor the situation this winter, and make some recommendations, after this winter as well for future winter use. So that's basically what.
Certainly a success story. I think that park is probably one of our busiest parks. I get a lot of positive feedback, especially from people who are not from this community, who are coming to this community and they're staying a little bit longer. You stay a little bit longer, then maybe you're shopping a little bit more, or you're staying for lunch or supper. So I think it's been certainly a success story, as you said.
Yeah, only about 50% of the users are from Bridgewater, so the rest are coming from other places in Lunenburg County and outside of Lunenburg County as well, in Queens County and other areas.
Any questions of the director? Someone prepared to put a motion? Oh,
Just wanted to comment that I think it's, obviously, we always have to protect from liabilities and manage the expectations, but I think it's great that the approach taken is to not discourage physical activity at any time of the year. I think that's really important as well, at your own risk.
Someone prepared to put a motion on the floor? Councilor Bergier.
That Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the recommendations of staff contained in document 17-210, that there be no winter maintenance of South Shore Vet Dog Zone, and that signs be posted advising the public.
Oh, we need. Oh. Is it different? All right. Do you want to just read it again? I don't know what's different.
That Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the recommendations of staff contained in document 17-210, that South Shore Vet Dog Zone remain open for unprogrammed activity for the winter, but without maintenance, and that the signs be posted advising the public.
Perfect, thank you. Seconder? Councilor McDonald, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Our next item is RFQ for Bridgewater wastewater treatment plant anaerobic digester cover replacement. And that sounds like a really attractive item. I hear anaerobic digester, I just feel like someone's doing exercises after they've eaten. Maybe that's just me.
Just you.
Just me. Mr. Feeney, do you want to?
Thank you. Two suppliers provided submissions to the request for quotation for a new anaerobic digester cover. The request for quotation allows for the pre-selection of the equipment so that it can be included in the detailed design process. The pre-selection includes the supply of the shop drawings from the equipment supplier that will be used in the tendering process at a later date. Purchase of the cover would depend on council approval and funding opportunities. Staff are seeking council's approval to fund the additional $10,000 plus HST this budget year for the cost of the shop drawings to allow the detailed design process to continue, as well as the pre-selection of the equipment from Evoqua Water Technologies.
Questions? Councilor Graves.
So I guess coming down the pipe, not this budget year, but next budget year probably will be a request for 300,000 or thereabouts.
Yes, we've applied to substitute the King Street funding, and we're still waiting to hear back, but part of that substitution included this project, the actual cover itself, which will probably be more in the range of about 790,000. Is what we're estimating. And that's not just the cover. There's there's other processes as far as the wastewater treatment plant itself. We have to modify some processes and clean the digester out, so it's disposal fees and things like that as well.
So just curious, once all that's done, is there still more to be done at the wastewater treatment plant?
Yes.
More costly things, tons of costly things,
Yes.
Larry.
It's lovely.
I just have a question, like, this is a $10,000 unbudgeted expense, so I just, like, where does that money come from? Because we don't print our own.
There's currently an approved $50,000 project for CBCL to be doing the design, part of the design. So what we're asking for is an over expenditure of that particular project in this year's budget. Overall, our capital program looks good as far as being within budgets, so we aren't concerned that overall our capital projects will be less than our approved budgets this year.
Further questions?
Have a motion.
Yes, please.
I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater approved an unbudgeted expenditure of $10,000 plus HST for purchase of manufacturer's shop drawings and the pre-selection of the equipment to Evoqua Water Technologies related to the wastewater treatment plant's anaerobic digester cover replacement project.
Seconder, please. Councilor Fagier, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We're going to move on to our community energy investment plan. And our sustainability planner, Mr. DeVried, is here to enlighten us. And while he's preparing, and while we have the town engineer here, I just, on behalf of all of us, I want to say thank you to your crews that were out in 2 storms over the holidays. Well, certainly around Christmas and last week. I was out and saw trucks everywhere, town trucks, and of course, fire department was out, police department was out, but public works was out and out and out and out, and I think our community fared quite well in the grand scheme of things with all that happened with 2 storms. So thank you, and please pass on my thanks and our thanks to all your teams that were out all hours of the day and night taking care of things. So thank you. Mr. DeVried, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm pleased to be before you today, and a member of our advisory committee. I just wanted to point out Ernie O'Neill has joined us this evening as well, because this marks the conclusion of quite a lengthy and in-depth community energy planning process. So I'm going to do about a 10-minute presentation on the Community Energy Investment Plan and the recommendations that have come out of that. So the document that you've received, and I've hopefully had a little bit of a chance to digest, represents quite a significant achievement for this town, but for broader communities across Canada. This has also been a really interesting initiative, and one that's been watched by quite a few organizations. The plan's vision is by 2050 that Bridgewater's green, self-supportive economy will be securely powered by clean and efficient energy systems. The community's conscious investments into energy infrastructure, equipment, training, and education will make energy affordable and accessible for all members of the community and contribute to our town's prosperity and resilience in the face of a changing climate and world. And it's been designed around 4 values: clean energy, efficient energy, secure energy, and affordable energy for the community. And if I can just take a moment to go back a little bit and put this in context of the work that the town has been doing over the past decade around our Sustainable Bridgewater program. You know, that program was really designed around this idea of living within the Earth's means while at the same time meeting basic human needs. That's the foundation of all the sustainability work that we've done, and I think that this plan follows very nicely in that trajectory and with those objectives. And certainly the feedback we've had from the community agrees with that. So that original sustainability work dealt with 7 key areas, priority areas for the town, and I think that you would also agree that this latest plan really does a fairly good job at touching on several of those areas. So while it was originally framed around energy or climate change, it's a much broader plan than just those 2 topics. And so, I'm pleased to think of it as a real continuation of that original work. Just to remind you, we started back in 2015 with the design of the program, and went through about a 2 to 2.5 year process in total to get us to where we are today. And with the bulk of the work taking place over about the last 18 months. We weren't able to do it alone. We were very pleased to work with 5 fantastic organizations, in addition to many local champions and partners, but the folks that pulled the plan together are the 5 on the board here, who we regard as our project consultants, and they all had a specific and important role. But it would be unfair to say that the plan could have been done with anything less than the number of people and organizations that are listed on our acknowledgements here. And so warm appreciation for many of our community partners and advisors, and again, folks like Ernie who gave a lot of their time, their free time and work time in some cases to help the community pull this together. So a real shared effort to get the plan done. And it started, of course, with early discussions on what can a community look like that is tackling energy in a fairly serious way and trying to get to this, local energy economy or clean energy economy, and lots of wonderful ideas came out of that. But I can encapsulate it by simply saying that we have an opportunity to make a decision. And the first is to go with sort of status quo as far as an energy future goes, and that's where energy costs continue to rise and money continues to leave the community because energy resources are going to be more constrained in the future than they are in the present. Or we can make a conscious decision as a community to invest in energy sustainability and local energy and create what we're calling a clean energy economy in this plan. And it's those 2 arrows there, the energy out and the money in, or whatever combination of that the plan has really investigated in great depth. And how do you do that? So that's where it came from. Council will know from a workshop that we held that the modeling approach that underlies the plan is very comprehensive. It's based on a parcel by parcel energy model of the entire community and represents one of the most in-depth and technically robust community energy plans that's been developed in Canada, and we're very lucky to be able to have accessed those kind of services for this work. The other two pieces of work, which are not insubstantial in and of themselves, were also attached to the plan that you received in your agenda package, and they include a culture and behavior change report done by IndEco Consulting, and also a sustainable bioenergy report that was done by Mersey Tobiatic Research Institute that we commissioned in partnership with the District of Lunenburg. And that in itself is a groundbreaking piece of work to look at, how can we actually encourage sustainable forestry in our area by procuring sustainably harvested bioenergy from our forests, and actually not only have carbon neutral energy, but improve the quality of our forests as well. Is there a way to do that? And they found that it is feasible to do that. So some fascinating work has gone into this. It all seems like, supplementary notes in an already big thing, but these are quite fantastic. So just real quickly, some of the things that we did. We launched publicly in July of 2016 with the Community Energy Center down on King Street, which started off a number of community engagements. One of the biggest that we've done is our Energy Partnership Program, which ended up having 20 local businesses and organizations joining the town and learning about energy and putting the plan together. We also funded and worked with community partners to fund the Living Energy Laboratory that allocated over $5,000 in cash and other rewards to local energy projects that were innovative and interesting, and several of which have continued to come to life and bear fruit. And that's certainly a program we hope to continue supporting into the future. And there's us with just a handful of our project winners. And some of these projects have been really fantastic and have created a lot of positive change. We've also gone out and done a number of community consultation and crowdsourcing events over the course of the 18 months. And all of that culminated in, I think, a real signature event, our Energize Nova Scotia Discovery Fair, which we intend to, or which we would recommend that the town continue hosting on a periodic basis, or challenge other communities to host as well. So a nice way to wrap up the project, bring all of our partners together and celebrate what was done. Really well-received event. Our online presence for the project was also substantial, with online surveys, questionnaires, engagement through Facebook, and so on. So quite a well-rounded engagement effort. And the bottom line in all of it was that we were working with the community to come up with different possibilities for where our community is going to go in terms of energy. And we explored three different futures. And at the end of the day, it was the most ambitious future, the 80% greenhouse gas emissions reduction, that was selected as the basis for the plan, and that informs all of its strategies and actions. To represent that visually, this diagram shows the dramatic change in Bridgewater's energy mix that is possible if we put in place a number of aggressive community actions and municipal actions to get there. And that shift will result in an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, essentially decarbonizing Bridgewater's economy while at the same time generating returns. So we can describe all of those transitions in a number of ways. The energy savings is substantial. The greenhouse gas emissions is substantial. But really the key findings and the take-home messages from the work are that, number one, this is feasible, this is possible, using technology that already exists today. The energy shift pays for itself. In fact, it can be financed, the transition can be financed through the energy savings. The energy shift saves energy, is an economic development strategy, and the town can work to enable it. So those are the main take-homes, and I know council's asked me a couple of times, can you give me a cheat sheet on all this stuff, and that'll be the foundation of it, and we'll make sure you get something so that you can speak to the community about it. I won't go over the remainder of the slides here in a lot of detail. You've seen a lot of this stuff, focusing on energy efficient buildings, new community scale energy systems, and clean and active transportation systems, and the investment of several $100 million into the local economy is what's required to enable that shift. Now, of course, the big question is, how do we line up that money? How do we create those investment opportunities? But the investment opportunities are there, and they've been mapped out. You've seen some of this work as well through a return on investment with respect to those solutions. So now we can take this work that's been done and take it places to find those investors and investment dollars for that work. Again, just a slide, and this one constantly blows my mind, that not only can we keep that cost, that energy cost curve steady, we can actually even drive it down. All people know about energy these days is costs going up. Well, people know that from their own residential energy use. We definitely know that from a commercial perspective. And what we can in fact show with a high degree of detail is that Bridgewater can be one of the cheapest energy communities in all of Atlantic Canada, if not Canada, by following this approach. And again, it's because we've really focused on that value of affordability and security in energy that we've been able to design the systems that will lead to that outcome. I won't say much about this, but again, there's a number of slides in your package or pages on your report that speak to the investment potential, the job growth potential in the community, and we can certainly dig into this in more detail if you'd like to ask any questions about that. At the end of the day, the plan is not just a plan for the town. It's a plan for the entire community, residents, organizations, institutions, businesses, and there's something that everybody can do to make this energy shift happen. The town's actions have been mapped out. There's 19 actions that have been developed, and they frame the town as community capacity builder, as energy enabler, and as energy investor itself. And those are provided in detail in your document, and I won't go through them just in the interest of time, but that's what we've managed to create. And then there's recommendations as well for higher levels of government. Just before I get into implementation, you haven't seen a lot about the money that's flowed through this project over the past year and a half. So I did just want to do a quick recap. We started out with a council-approved budget of $66,000. Not all the final bills are in, but I'm fairly certain that we're going to end up at a total project value of about $174,000 plus an additional $30,000 in kind, so an over $200,000 project, and the final cost of the town is just slightly north of $60,000. So it represents quite a remarkable co-funding of this initiative by a number of different partners in the community, and the province and FCM certainly came through with the bulk of that support. But I'm pleased to be able to report on that outcome. We weren't I probably shouldn't say we weren't quite sure where it was headed at a couple of points, but we managed to keep the ship on steady water. So where does it go from here? Well, from here we go into implementation, and council can enable that to the degree that council is comfortable. So the report contains a 3-year timeline that says if we focus on these things, and these are some of the council priorities that council has articulated in a workshop that we did, if we focus on these things, we can really have this plan take off. They focus on working on the the financing systems piece, getting 3 what we're calling signature energy projects off the ground, continuing our community engagement, and working on town operations for areas that relate to energy. We've also developed a preliminary implementation budget around this work, and yes, the numbers are large. What I'm hoping that we can do this evening is help to contain some of that and focus on the first slice of that work, with future commitments being able to be made as council is comfortable doing that. Basically, we can't achieve the ambitions of the plan without additional personnel, which is the largest cost area. We propose the bringing on board of 4 new staff or 4 new full-time or part-time staff with the main one being an energy development specialist. We're moving into a new kind of territory with programming and planning and development, and we need someone that can complement our existing skill set. Town Council has already approved a planning and sustainability intern as part of the operating budget for at least 1 year, 2018-19, and we'll see where that goes after that. And then we're also recommending an increase in capacity in our energy management and fleet management work. And Council will learn more about that as we move through the budget process. So again, trying to keep this as concise as we can. Capital costs associated with the deployment of some of these bigger systems are not in this budget. This is a capacity-oriented budget, and getting the people and experts online that we need in order to do the work. And again, approximately $34,000 of this has been approved already by Council for the intern position. So I'm now going to drill down a little bit deeper into the proposed budget for 2018 and 18-19 and 19-20. This is a hypothetical at this point, but we're trying to show how the funding may come together for these first 2 years. So tonight, the recommendation from staff is that Council approve a grant application to the Green Municipal Fund, or I should say the FCM Municipalities for Climate Innovation Program, $175,000 over 2 years. We've been made aware that FCM has another grant program starting soon that's specifically for retaining staff for doing this kind of work. We would aggressively go after that one. The Science Horizons program, we've already been approved for 1 year of which is for the intern to help cover that salary. And then there's, definitely potential to work with other funders, ACOA, the province, et cetera, to bring in some additional dollars. And there we go, we've got the town of Bridgewater share somewhere in the 20 to 30% range. That would be hopefully a place where it's something that we can work with. Again, it is Council's decision. Ultimately, this is just an early draft. The nice thing about the approach is that, and this is the same thing that we did for Energize Bridgewater, we can build the budget modularly. So as new funding opportunities arise, we can slice off another section of whatever Council is comfortable spending, go after that fundraising. If the funding doesn't come in, we don't have to do it. So we can manage our budgetary risk by taking that kind of approach. So just briefly, the Municipalities for Climate Innovation Program offers $175,000 or up to 80% of eligible costs. And the stream that we propose applying under is called the Climate Change Mitigation Operational Studies. And it would be to put some work into the energy development structures and financing services that we think are essential to getting these ambitious projects off the ground using appropriate development mechanisms and financing mechanisms so that the money is available when the projects need to hit the ground. And this is definitely some innovative work in the Canadian context, and we think FCM is very interested in it. Unfortunately, the deadline for the funding is midnight tonight. So depending on how Council makes decisions tonight, I may either sleep or I may not sleep, who knows? That's irrelevant. What's important is that we've already put some work into the application opportunity under the CAO's direction, and we can hit send on that if Council so approves this evening. If not, we definitely don't need to. Confirmation of Council's intent to co-fund the initiative is important because it increases the application score. So having that motion in the bag is something that will help increase the town's chances to get the funding. And the funding breakdown, as FCM would see it, is provided here. So there's that $175,000 going in. Our proposal is that the town, on paper, commit $87,000 of a total of a $262,000 budget. That's 33%. And of that $87,000, sorry, I have to say $18,000 is already pre-approved because that's the share of the intern that Council has already looked at approving. And There is a slight change in the slide that you see here compared to what was in the staff report. We've basically been able to reduce the budget by $36,000. So I have a new revised motion for you. I don't know how aware of that you are coming into tonight's meeting. But that would, it's a good news story. It's a good news. We need less money. It's a good thing. But that would achieve that financing, systems, research and development, and that community engagement effort in order to support that for the next 18 months. In conclusion, staff has prepared 4 recommendations for you, and the yellow highlights in the text on this slide indicate where numbers have been changed slightly, and all that is that $36,000 has been reduced from the numbers that's in your staff report. That's the only change, because that just carries through all those 3 numbers. Clear as mud?
Could you read that slide up, please?
I can, yes.
Well, while
No problem.
we're having...
Sandra, just for clarity, the motions are shortened slightly. So I've removed some of the duplicate text from the alternatives, for example. But the only thing that's changed is the 3 numbers.
Okay, while we're changing those numbers, does anybody have any questions for our sustainability planner?
There we go.
I mean, this is exciting.
It is very much.
If anyone thought we were going to start down this journey in 2009, whenever we started down this first road, and we were just going to have nothing to show for it at the end, that they were, I don't know what they were thinking, right? The rubber is hitting the road, and the last number of councils have been very supportive of this plan, and it keeps moving forward, and I mean, this is very exciting. I will add that a number of the slides that Leon put up, especially, I'm trying to buy you some time, right? Especially the slides with the charts and the savings, those are the slides that we used when we went to the international network of Michelin cities, and those were the slides that popped out for the other cities who didn't really, I guess they saw the savings, but they didn't see that savings actually then go back into your community. And the one that really pops for me is, if you look at Nova Scotia Power, and Nova Scotia Power's parent company, which is a U.S. company, when we pay them, that money goes out of the country, not only out of the town and out of the province, but it goes out of the country. So if you reduce your energy bill, keeping that money in people's pockets, it's also money that now is not leaving the community, it's staying here, and we're spenders, so we'll spend it in the community. This is very much an economic development. It's not even the cornerstone of it, it's almost the keystone that sits above them all. And when you look at economic development in Bridgewater going forward, the jobs it creates, the money it saves, the way it helps people who maybe are struggling to make ends meet, and now you can reduce that power bill. It's just a whole bunch of boxes that it ticks. So it's pretty exciting. Is that enough time?
That's great. Everyone could just refresh their screens.
So you'll notice in your package when it refreshes that there's a number of motions. We have, the first one is independent, and then you have to choose option A, B, or C for the next ones, and then we've got a couple more motions. So in total, we're reading 4 motions. So if someone would like to start with the first one, that's there. Councilor Graves.
I move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of staff, approve the Community Energy Investment Plan, the way forward as contained in document 17-212, and direct staff to begin its implementation.
Thank you. Seconder, Councilor Frazier. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. So, someone prepared to make a motion, either option A, B, or C. That's in your package. Somebody? Give you a second to look at the options there.
Yes, sorry.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
So what's the timeline on hearing back from some of these, Leon?
This particular grant application is less than 2 months.
We'll hear within 2 months.
That's what they've committed to in their documentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's quick.
That would put it in March.
Right, okay.
Does anyone have any other questions before we put the motion on the floor? Councilor McDonald.
Kind of a silly question, but between the number 2 and alternative number 1, is that the difference is how much external funding we're asking you to achieve.
Correct.
I'm assuming that regardless of what motion we approved, you would look for as much external money as possible, right? It just
That's right.
allows you to move forward.
That's what motion 4 is about.
Right.
Right, is about going and continuing this
Right.
process of looking for funding toward it. The motion 2 is crafted for the funder. The funder needs to see something in writing,
Okay.
right?
Right.
So the town has 2 options. The town can either say, yes, we commit to the difference between the total, the 80, we commit to the 87, right?
Mhm.
Or town council can say, we can't commit to 87, find another 50 or find another 30, right? And then what the funder will see is, 40 committed, 30 unknown. And then we're going to have to find the 30, and only when we find the 30 is the project to go.
Right.
So that may make our project look a little less attractive if we're going up against someone who's making a bigger, more confident commitment.
Yeah, the risk is reduced points awarded for the application.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Graves, do you have a question?
And if I could just add,
Yep.
if FCM doesn't fund us, then this can disappear from the books. I mean,
Right.
we can go. It'll refer back to budget process.
But we've got some really good momentum going on with this now. We've got some momentum that we should move it forward, right? Like,
Leon seems to have a history of finding dollars.
yeah.
Deputy Mayor Tanner.
So Leon, is that for lack of a better word, a factual statement that there are points awarded based on how committed the municipality is to
It's a fact.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, it's not possible to achieve full points for a certain section of the application unless all other funding sources are committed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then, can you put the other one back up there?
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
so then just 2 without the alternative is the only way to achieve full points, is that what you're saying?
Just 2, yes. So 2A
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is what
In-
we should be doing anyway.
in your
Would
package.
you like to have a motion?
Councilor McDonald had a question first.
Sorry, one more. Regardless of whether we approved 2 or 2-1, we still have to, in our budget, pre-approve and commit 244,000, correct? That's still what the item will be in our budget when we come to deliberations.
Yep.
Okay.
But there should
Just
be-
wanted to be clear on that, yeah. It's not going to affect it.
There's a conditional in the statement.
Mhm.
It's just how much.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the motion.
Yes,
Your Worship.
please.
I move the town council for the town of Bridgewater pre-approve $244,000, including net HSTM funding toward the implementation of the first 2 years of the Community Energy Investment Plan as part of the 2018-19 fiscal year and budget, conditional on achieving at least $175,000 in external funding for the initiative, resulting in a net cost for the town of up to $69,000.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councilor McDonald, further discussion?
Only, just proud to be part of it.
Anything else? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Number 5 in your motion package there, please, if someone is so willing.
I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater direct staff to finalize and submit a funding application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Municipalities for Climate Innovation, MCIP, program to seek funding toward the implementation of the Community Energy Investment Plan.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councilor Frazier, any further discussion?
Question?
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Thank you. Motion is carried. Looks like you will be up till midnight. That's your application. Good luck. We'll get you out of here really quick. And the last motion in your package if someone is prepared. Councillor Frazier.
Yes, Your Worship, that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater direct staff to seek other funding opportunities and partnerships towards the implementation of the Community Energy Investment Plan, and to bring any such proposals to Council for review as part of the 2018-19 budget deliberations.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Thorburn. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Mr. DeVried. I guess you will be
Busy.
busy.
I'd have been more busy if you changed the numbers on me.
I'm sure you're going to be busy.
Can you turn it off?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Next item, under business arising unfinished business, is the second and final reading of the taxi bylaw. It is Chapter 11, but let's just mean something different here.
Can't find my.
So we do have that in your package. We did have first reading. You'll notice that the next item is the fees policy, and we can have a discussion on that, but we are missing the out-of-town rates, so we are going to bring the taxi owners together and have a discussion with them so that we can better understand the challenges for the out-of-town rates. And just kind of work with them to make sure that they have to be built into the fees policy. They traditionally weren't, but we have to make sure we put those in. But we need to consult with the taxi owners before we set the rates.
I agree.
But we can have that discussion if you want. But first is the second and final reading. I will just add also that if we pass the taxi bylaw, it will not be published until we deal with the fees policy. So it will sit on the books, but it won't be in effect. It will be the previous taxi bylaw until we publish it. So even though we're passing it, it doesn't mean that that new taxi bylaw comes into effect, because we do have to deal with the fees. So I just want the council to be aware and the public to be aware. Is someone prepared to put a motion on the floor for the taxi bylaw? Councilor Thorburn.
I would move that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the second reading of the proposed amended taxi bylaw, Chapter 11, as presented in document 17-193A. Adopt as a bylaw and authorize staff to publish all public notices pursuant to Section 168 of the Municipal Government Act.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. Councilor McDonald. And again, those will be published after we deal with the fees policy. And just for the public as a reminder, this gives us the ability to actually enforce these bylaws. We had some issues. The number one issue from the taxi cabs in town that are licensed and they have to go through police background checks and have adequate insurance is that they're competing against taxis that have no such requirements. And so it wasn't a level playing field, but it also, there's a bit of risk to the public getting into an unlicensed cab that may or may not have the adequate insurance and certainly would not have a background check, a police background check on the driver. So this allows us some more tools to actually enforce that.
So help me understand why we are defining fares in a fees policy. Why would we ever play with the free market? Why would we let them charge what they charge and be in competition with one another and so on and so forth?
That is my question as well.
Some municipalities don't, and I personally, I see why they don't. Why get involved? We don't dictate what bread sells for at the grocery store, as an example. I mean, it's an extreme example, but
I think
can someone help me with that?
Taxi rates are defined by municipal units, right? So if you go to Halifax, the rate per kilometer is done there. I don't disagree with you when you look at where the world is going with Uber and Lyft and stuff. That's determined by, that's free market. But, I don't think we've ever actually had the debate and discussion on that.
I think that's a good question.
Sorry.
No, it's a good question, and I don't have a specific reason why we would want to deal with the rates. It's, in terms of letting the market set it, the process is that the industry does set the standard rates. I think if we were to change to the process as you've articulated, we would need to go do some more consultation about how that would work so that people aren't undercutting each other so that folks understand what the market's gonna look like. This, right now, is predictable. The 6 or 7 cabs that are licensed understand the rules and would follow these rules. You're right, with things like Uber and what's the other one,
Lyft.
I would imagine that sooner than later, the taxi bylaw will be challenged, and we'll have to figure out how we're going to address those.
In discussing the fees, though, to your point, it is the owners that really discuss and debate the fees.
Sure.
So in that respect, the last discussion we had, it was, in a sense, the market that was determining it. I think the other end of that discussion was there had to be some pushback because I don't know how to say it because it was a bit of a negotiation, but they need to be reined in a little bit from time to time, where you're going to see $14 from going from no frills to Superstore, which does put some of our residents at a disadvantage. Now we have a bus, so there's a bit of a difference there. But I don't know if it's,
So
I think it's baby steps to where you might be going.
So how many companies do we currently deal with total?
6 or 7.
Six.
Yeah. 6 or 7 companies, not
Yeah.
necessarily
Sorry.
with
And some
X
have
number of
many,
vehicles.
many cabs.
That seems like, anyway, okay.
So,
Sorry, yes, Councillor Thorburn first.
Yeah, when I read the material, I think there's 6 companies. 5 were in favor of that, but I look at the fairness to the end user. You could go in, and at some point in time, if you let them set their own prices, that they'll put most of the companies on their business, and then they'll have one price, which will be what they want to charge, and we want everything that's fair and reasonable to our residents. So I like the idea of the taxi companies getting together and setting their price collectively, not individually charging what they want to charge.
Councillor McGinnis.
so I guess I don't understand.
So right now, we have a motion for the taxi bylaw.
Yeah.
The fees is kind of the next item.
So we probably shouldn't even be talking.
Well, we can,
No, but
they kind of go, well.
the bylaw references the fee schedule.
Yeah, so we kinda have
you
to-
can't have one without the other
Right.
So
currently.
the taxi companies are gonna set the fee, and we're gonna enforce it, is that the idea?
The bylaw is going to enforce it.
The bylaw is gonna enforce it?
Yes.
So just for clarity, so through the bylaw, it says, we consult, and so we pulled the taxi owners that in a group requested that we increase the rate. Commercial rate was last increased from $6 to $8, and that will be what's put forward in the fees policy. What we recognize we missed is we don't have a fee set for town to exit 12, and in order to have compliance and in full Smith v. bylaw, we need to include that in the fees. But, so the rate is determined by the industry as a whole, and however it's approved by council.
If I may, so what if we don't like the fee? What if they come in and say we wanna charge $14? Are we gonna agree with that?
Well, we would have a discussion around this table.
Well, I think it should be free market.
I'm just going by the way it's set up now, is that we would have a discussion around this table. If the wish of council is to let the market determine what the market wants to determine, then that's the discussion we need to have. But right now, that's not where we're at yet.
I mean, I understand Councillor Thorburns' issue, I guess, to protect the consumer, but when you've got 6 or 7 companies, it's not like we have 1 or 2 companies where they can sort of potentially collaborate and figure out a higher price. You get 6 or 7 competing. I mean, that seems to be plenty of competition in the market to allow for a fair fare to be developed. That's just me.
In fairness to the deputy mayor, you're starting out with 6 or 5, but if you let them have their own level, you'll find out you'll be down to 2 or 3, and then all the fairness is gone. And to take it one step further, Councillor, the taxi companies have the right to charge what they want if they take people outside of town. This is just within the borders of the town of Bridgewater. If they're going to
That's not what we're
Halifax, they have their own rates now, I think.
I believe all their out-of-town rates are negotiated.
Right.
on a case-by-case basis. So what we're proposing is to have a discussion to actually bake in that out-of-town rate. So
Right.
if you're
To exit
going to
12.
exit 12.
Yeah.
um,
But I was thinking more like runs to the hospital and different ones that they go on.
Yeah, those, I don't think those will be negotiated on a case-by-case basis
Right.
with the driver. I don't
Okay.
imagine we're going to be handling on that. Councillor McDonald?
Does the fact that we now offer public transit play a role in this, where we are, in essence, a competitor? We may not be a direct competitor on every customer that they provide service to, but we are a competitor and we're setting their prices.
So this goes back to, they actually set their prices. They're
Right.
the ones that wanted the rate increase.
We have the end say here, right? On a bylaw.
Yeah. Their biggest concern was not the competition of the bus. It was the competition from the taxis that were literally
Right.
charging $1. But you're getting into an unlicensed cab that who knows what's going on with that vehicle. So that was their biggest concern. That's what the bulk of the changes in the bylaw were, to allow us to actually enforce it, because right now we really had no ability to enforce that. So that's the bulk of that, to your point of enforcement, Councilor McGuinness. But the fees, we're going to defer the fees discussion. Perhaps we need to defer the fees discussion and have one with ourselves first before we approach the cab companies, in order to better understand what we want to approach them with. There's not much point in talking to them about, what would you charge to exit 12, or what would you charge for these fees, and then it comes back to council, and then we decide as a council that we just want it to be free market. I think we should make sure that we know what we want to propose to the taxi owners. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Through the mayor to council, if staff would need to do some work to determine how we would recommend a bylaw or no bylaw with regards to a free market system. So it would need some rework. Now, I don't believe that the bylaw is time sensitive. So if that's the will of council for us to do some additional work on that, we can take that away and do that. We can also discuss that notion with industry to get feedback on if that's what industry's looking for or not. I don't have enough information at hand to be able to provide advice to council on what the benefits of moving towards a unregulated taxi industry, and what that would look like in terms of our role in that.
My only concern, I'll just add, with letting the market decide, or letting the owners decide on their own, is the example I'll use is with Uber this New Year's Eve in Toronto, where they went to their, that demand pricing that they flip to when there's a big event, and people were being charged $250 to go from downtown Toronto a couple of miles up the road, because cabs were all being taken because people are drinking, they need a cab. Bus systems reduced, so they went to that on-demand pricing. And so I do have a little bit of fear that in a small community with a limited number of options, it is difficult to get a cab in this community. If you've tried at midnight, it is not easy. I do have a little bit of a fear of someone calling saying I need a taxi, or I have to drive home, and that cab company is saying it's going to cost you $50 to get from the pub to Murray Avenue. Well, I'll just drive then. I'm not going to pay $50. So I don't know where you find that balance of letting the market take that over, but at the same time protecting your citizens so that everyone does have a safe way to get around the community. So, Councillor Thurman.
I'm just concerned that the people that's in the business have an opportunity to express what they would like us to do, rather than us decide what we should do for them. I think it's their business. They should set what they want, and we should try and work with them to achieve what their needs are, not trying to set policies that is not fair to them in general.
do we want to, we have a motion on the floor, but do we want to kind of defer this to the next meeting? We can have a conversation with the taxi owners and just even get some sense of where they are on this, and then we can at least bring that back, because if they're in complete disagreement with allowing the market to, like, we don't want to set up a battle with the people we're trying to help, but
Right.
I see everyone's points.
Yeah.
Councilor Frazier.
I just had a question on the wording of 6.7A, where it talked about the criminal record check would be done on the applicant, and I think Councillor Thorburn brought up about the vulnerable sector check
That's
at a
included.
previous council. And I'm just wondering, should that be in there or as well, the vulnerable sector check, or is it just criminal check that we're doing on the applicant?
You'll find the updated document 193A.
Okay.
So it is included then?
It is now in there?
Okay,
Okay.
great. I had the same.
Councilor McGinnis.
Just one question. We set a fee in conjunction with the cab companies.
Correct.
How do you know they're following it? How do you know taxi cab A is not charging less? Or if it's after midnight or if it's a big event in town, they're not charging more?
They keep detailed logs
posted.
that are checked.
Of every person that gets in the car? And how do you know what they paid?
Well, because it's a flat rate, then you can do the math.
Well, you got a flat rate, but how do you know? I mean, if I'm driving a cab, I just don't put it in the log. I mean, I just don't think it's possible for us to effectively regulate. That's my problem.
Did you?
Sure. So certainly there are some challenges in regulating taxis. We would be able to, under this bylaw, specifically focus our enforcement around ensuring that taxis operating in the town are licensed, which is a public safety concern. With regards to, could a taxi driver determine a fee that's non-compliant with our bylaws? That's certainly possible. If it was learned, they could be fined under the bylaw. You know, we would have to probably have some evidence of that happening, likely a complaint. Now, the industry does self-police quite a bit, so, for example, the taxis that are not licensed, we're aware who they are and where they go. This bylaw enables that.
Also, there's the taxis right now, there hasn't been a problem. They're all charging the same rates. I haven't heard of any problems. You know, in terms of someone else charging or not charging.
No, it's only been with the unlicensed.
Yeah, this is what it's gonna control.
So would you like us to, we can push this item to, I guess we can push it to the next council meeting, have a.
I think you have to ask the question.
Yeah.
There's the advertising factor that we
Yeah,
discussed.
so we have to figure out if we need to re-advertise, because this is final reading, so we'd have to, yeah. If that's the will of council, we could defer it to a future meeting, re-advertise if need be, have a conversation with the cab owners and bring that information back to council, just to see how open they and willing they are to discuss whether they want to let the market make that decision, and then that can come back to council, and council can take that information and still make its decision, but it will be based with a little bit more information. Is that acceptable to everyone, to the mover and seconder?
Yep.
That's okay? All right, so we'll move that to a future council meeting. Good discussion, good, I like these debates. It's good. So we'll report back. The next item is Soul Harbor's Rescue Mission request for tax exemption. So again, this is the second reading of this. If someone wishes to make that motion. Oh,
Yeah.
Councilor
I
McDonald?
would move the town council for the town of Bridgewater approve the second reading of Chapter 192, tax exemption bylaw for named registered charitable organizations by adding 136 Pleasant Street, Souls Harbor Rescue Mission, the whole, to Schedule A, adopt as bylaw, and authorize staff to publish all public notices pursuant to Section 168 of the Municipal Government Act.
Have a seconder, please. Councilor Graves, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Our next item is rodent control. Of course, we did have a study done. There was some, we did approve of some money to do some, I guess, just some tests to figure out where the rodents were, and so there is a motion to refer this to budget deliberations. I don't know if there's, I don't know if Mr. Feener's here to answer any questions on this, or if there's.
I can roll through it.
Oh, can you? Do you want to?
I'm the rat guy.
You're the rat. I didn't want to say it, but.
Graham's the rat guy. So, through the mayor to council, following a number of public inquiries and complaints, council gave direction to staff to move forward and with a program to assess the rat population. There were 20 feeding stations set up, and the activity was monitored, demonstrating that there are established rat populations in at least 12 of them. So with that information and looking at other, and considering the complaints and looking at other approaches to rodent control, staff are recommending that council consider, in the auspices of budget, a new service whereby we would take an integrated approach to rodent control, which would include a town baiting program, some education, and enforcement of some of our bylaws that enable things that would reduce the risk of rodents anyway, through our minimum standards bylaw, solid waste bylaw. And we could look potentially in the future at adding some more requirements in some of our development agreements or demolition permits, but we believe that through encouragement we can achieve some success there.
Any questions on that?
I guess just a comment. I guess 60% of the traps had rats, so 40% didn't. I guess that's a somewhat of a good news story. So in terms of the baiting, is it poisoning or birth control? Like for the baiting of the traps, right? So you're trying to catch them, I take it.
Through the mayor to council, so through the program, it was measurement of activity. It wasn't poison. Baiting going forward is poison.
No, that's what I meant, going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not trying to catch them.
No.
Yeah.
So then what happens with the rats when you kill them?
They go to rat heaven.
But doesn't that become a problem?
That's a good question. The rodent control company takes them away and they get disposed of as appropriate.
My jokes don't seem so bad now.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Councilor Bergier,
Yeah.
please say
So with regards to the findings of the different stations, did they give any indication as to whether our problem is moderate, severe, as far as population? Do we have any indication of that?
So through council, through discussions, the evidence would suggest that across the province we're seeing increased rodent presence, particularly in communities that have construction activity going on, which we do. We had a lot of construction activity in recent years, which may have disturbed some nests. However, with the change in climate, it may be affecting rat populations. So there's a number of factors. I think subjectively, the sense is that the rat populations are increasing, or at least they're more present in a number of communities. So we've seen this comparable work done in the recent couple of years in some other urban centers.
Okay. And just a second piece, part of this process is to educate, obviously, and to inform the public of necessary steps that they can be, so those 12 areas, will those be identified as where the problem or the rat population seems to be higher to let the public know, or is that part of the plan?
Sure, through the mayor to council. So just for clarity, municipality of town's not allowed to do baiting on private property.
Right.
So there will be areas where if there's complaints, we would be doing enforcement through the or education through our our different compliance staff. The 12 locations would be based on where need is. So we might identify this year that it's in these 12 locations, but for budget purposes, we determined that we would put forward 12 stations per year, and that could change based on complaints and things like that. So that'd be on municipal properties.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Someone prepared to make a motion?
Just a question about the baiting. I'm assuming, another foolish question, that there are safe practices in baiting, and that's part of the education?
Through the mayor to council, correct, and that's why we'll be employing a qualified service provider that uses products as per the Pest Control Act and deploys them in ways to make sure that they're not also susceptible to cats and dogs and other things. So we're not just dumping poison here, there, and everywhere. We'll have baiting stations and properly maintained.
And so there is actually an act?
Yes.
That residents would have to follow as well?
Yes, so the Federal Pest Control Act regulates, licenses service providers, regulates products, what products are allowed, how you use it, and we would be looking for that. Moving forward, we would develop a solicitation to select a service provider, and we would review their approach and which products they would suggest to use. But very clearly, that's required under their licenses and their act, what they can use and how for public safety.
Okay, we had a neighbor that used warfarin, and our family pet became victim of the way that it was used. So that's why I was very concerned about whether residents are controlled in how they use any poisonous products.
Yeah, so that'd be part of education as well. It's just reminding people of that.
Right.
Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor
I'll go
Stourbridge.
ahead. The town council for the town of Bridgewater refer the matter of rodent control to the 2018-19 budget deliberations.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder, please? Councilor McDonald. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Our last item of business here is the North Parkade repairs. So there's actually quite a bit of detailed information there, but there's recommendation for some to be put into the parkade, $50,000 worth of work. So, Mr. Feener, do you want to just run through very shortly what some of that is?
As far as the work, we're suggesting that council, at a minimum, considers a more detailed engineering review of the structure. Again, ongoing spot deck repairs. Also, the last assessment that was completed identified some column erosion protection. We've done this type of work in the past a number of years ago, and also suggested some isolated painting of the more rusted areas, and that's totaling about $50,000 for next year.
I know there's going to be discussion on this. Councilor Graves first, please.
Just a comment in regards to the fencing. So we talked about the fencing last year, the fact that Pigeonista Park looked great, North Parkade not so great, and that the addition or putting the fence around it or putting in a new fence might make it look a little bit better, not only for the water side from the old bridge, but also from King Street. And would adding a bridge, if it was added, would it interfere with future construction? So what I'm saying, could we safely add the fence to the North Parkade with the expectation that if any other renovations are done, it'll still be there?
I'm not sure I fully understand.
You don't mean bridge, you mean decking, right? Is that what you meant?
I mean the
railing.
fence on the fence on the North Parkade.
railing.
The railing.
Yeah.
It doesn't look very good.
Correct.
So if
And-
we were to replace that, which we were supposed to do last year,
Yes.
for the $60,000,
Yes.
and then other work had to be done, electrical work, maybe adding water, the decking, it wouldn't interfere with the new fence, would it?
It would be beneficial to do the electrical, for example, at the same time or prior, in combination with the railing, because I suspect it'd be integrated within the railing,
Okay.
depending again on if council decides on how much electrical. We provided a couple of options, one just being more or less an entrance at the north side of the parkade. Also, electrical around the perimeter of the parkade, essentially being plugs. So it almost depends on what council would decide. If it's decided that we're not going to provide electrical around the exterior, then certainly the rail could be put in and not compromise the electrical installation. So it really depends. There's a number of options that we've provided with cost estimates for council's consideration. So I guess there is a possibility that there are benefits to do certain components at the same time, depending on which components council sees.
For the railing, it could be a couple of years before that railing is completed.
Well, last year, or this year, I should say,
With the decking.
there certainly was a $60,000 budget approved by council to replace the railing with materials similar to the new park. And of course, we suggested deferring that project because of the additional expenses that we incurred once we removed the asphalt entrance to the parkade. So it certainly can be put in, for future budget considerations, if that's the council's wishes. Any of these items can be included as part of the budget.
So I guess the
deliberation.
question before the motion goes out is should $60,000 be included for the railing?
So, Mr. Mayor, the primary thing is it refers us to budget, so you don't need to pick a exact number. It's basically referring the report to budget for
That's fine.
consideration. We wanted to provide you that information in front of budget. We're going to have a whole lot of budget decisions to make, so this could be one of them.
Okay, that's great.
Councilor McDonald.
The steel painting is in isolated areas. Is that around the railings or down around the
The
support
underneath,
structures?
mainly the
Okay.
underneath, correct. And just after, I'll say, looking at the reports more closely, one of the things that we did not provide and didn't have the information at the time was complete painting of the steel structure. We anticipated being, I'll say, in the hundreds of thousands because of access and the process required around waterways and things like that. But we didn't have that information at the time. If council wishes for us to obtain that prior to budget or whatever we can.
Councilor Thorburn.
That would be good to know, Larry, because if we have to paint that, then it's kind of a moot point to put the railing around it and find out that we didn't paint it. So I think you have to look at priorities and cost and some sort of a plan that goes with what we hope to accomplish in the end. And the right process.
Well, that's my concern. I have a great concern. I don't want to get rid of the North Parkade, so I'll make that clear now. But I don't want to spend good money on something that may not last for a very long period of time. The existing structure, the foundation of that parkade, without substantial work, how long will it last you? And that's an unfair question of you. But are we looking at 10 years, 15 years?
This is one of the reasons why we're suggesting the detailed engineering review. In the past, periodically, we'd have a more detailed assessment of the structure completed. Lately, we've had what we call a condition assessment. So it's a consultant coming in and doing a review of what's there. So one of our recommendations is it's time perhaps to have a more detailed analysis of the structure. Part of what they'd be looking at is certainly the support structure as well as the decking. There's other processes other than visual inspections that can be done to assess the condition.
Should that not be the first thing we do?
Part of the reason why we're recommending that, because it may suggest something different than what's already on the list.
There was mention last year, Mr. Fury might want to forget that he mentioned this, but at the opening of the new park, I remember in his remarks, he mentioned how excited he would be the province would undertake at some point in the near future work on the old bridge, grinding it down and repainting it, when he talked about his boardwalks down both sides. So
I heard that.
well, I think most of us remember that. And, you know, when that happens down the road, that's exciting. I'm just wondering, when we talk about the cost of painting that North Parkade, because you have to put all those protections in place, it would be nice to know if the province is going to tackle painting the bridge, let's say 3 years down the road, because it won't be next year, this year or next year. But let's say 3 years down the road, they're going to go out to tender to somebody who is going to be setting up all that stuff to protect that waterway underneath that bridge. Would it not make sense at that time to see if those same people could just extend that, put that gear underneath the parkade for it to be painted? I'm just wondering, we should be in communication with whoever, I guess that's transportation.
Yes.
Just to make sure we don't do two different things.
Mr. Mayor, in fact, Mr. Feener and I have a meeting with Transportation Infrastructure Renewal on that request here in the next couple of weeks. We commit before Christmas, we get together to discuss that project. So it's great to know that the MLA committed to that.
Oh, yeah, he said it. Nick Yorston was recording it, and Keith probably has a copy of it somewhere. So it's there. I know my heart leapt. Yeah. Any further discussion? Someone prepared to put a motion on the floor, please? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
I move the Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater refer the budget items totaling $50,000 for parkade maintenance as contained in document 17-089B to the 2018-19 budget deliberation.
Seconder, please. Councilor McDonald. Any further discussion?
Maybe we can get a 2-for-1 deal with the province?
Hey, listen, we should always be asking.
Why not? Okay.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We have no further business here. We do have an in-camera meeting next room. So that is the end of our agenda. Motion to adjourn, please. Don't all jump at once. You must stick around. Councilor Gier, Deputy Mayor Tanner, thank you. We are adjourned.